Alrighty, people, it has been a very confusing week if you enjoy collecting physical media, because basically every piece of information that has come out about the Nintendo Switch 2 so far has been either inaccurate or just misreported, or there's been some asterisk with it. So today, I aim to sit down and just lay out all of the facts, everything we actually know about physical game cartridges on the Nintendo Switch 2, because not only are games not $90 like a lot of people are still saying almost a week after the presentation, we now know that Switch 2 editions will have the Switch 2 upgrade on the cartridge, so there's no fear of buying Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, for example, and having to download a Switch 2 update. It will be on that cartridge in that red box, but also there's a lot of confusion around how game keycards work. So today I wanted to sit down and just lay out everything we actually know about how physical cartridges work on the Nintendo Switch 2. Of course, if you are new here and you enjoy collecting content, Nintendo Switch 2 content, I would appreciate you subscribing. Let's get into it. Let's start off by talking about what is maybe the hottest topic, and that is the pricing of Nintendo Switch 2 games. I have seen it misreported so much that games will be $90 physically and $80 digitally. In fact, I even said as much in a video I posted last week where I was like, yeah, it's not 100% right now, but it sounds like in some regions that games will be a little bit more expensive. And that does seem to be the case in some certain regions. That'll depend on the exact country you're located in, Europe, for example. But in the US, games are not more expensive physically than they are digitally. And the other thing is that games are not, I repeat, they are not across the board $80. I've seen so many posts being like, everything is $80. They're charging $80 for all of their games now. That is simply not true. If we look at Walmart here, which has a couple of the games already up, there's pages up for them not available for pre-order yet, we can see that there are a few games listed here for $79.99. However, only one of these games is like a true $80 title, and here's what I mean by that. Mario Kart World is $80. Nintendo has already defended this. They've already said in interviews and stuff that they will be having a variable pricing system going in place here for a lot of their titles, and Mario Kart World, despite being a launch title, just happens to be one of those big games that they think they can justify selling for $80. But then you look at a game like Donkey Kong Bonanza, which we don't know who's making it. It seems like it's probably the 3D Mario team, but it's Donkey Kong, not necessarily an A-lister like a Mario or a Zelda. That is going to cost $70. Even though it is a big game, it is a big 3D Donkey Kong game that a lot of people have been wanting for a while, that is $70. So to me, I look at that and I say, okay, Mario Kart, that's their biggest franchise, that's $80. But then something still as big as Donkey Kong, likely made by the 3D Mario team, once again, we don't 100% know that, that's only $70. So we'll have to see how this all goes, but if Donkey Kong Bonanza is $70, I can't imagine a game like, let's say, Kirby Air Riders later this year being $80, or frankly, even a game like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, because it is more niche. I think when we're looking at $80 Nintendo games, we're talking about Mario Kart World, maybe the next 3D Mario, 3D Zelda, Smash Bros, Animal Crossing, the things that sell 30 million copies. Maybe a game like Splatoon would also eke in there, but I don't think we'll be looking at, let's say, Pikmin 5 in a couple of years as an $80 title. I just don't think that will be the case. It's just unfortunate timing for Nintendo, and they really should have done better messaging with all of this, because Mario Kart is their biggest game and they wanted to have that be $80. It made the messaging way more confusing than it needed to be. It's just like when Tears of the Kingdom launched a few years ago as their only $70 title. It was because it was their most premium game at that point. Most of the games that Nintendo releases are not on the tier of a Tears of the Kingdom or a Mario Kart World. So we have to see what franchises they decide to put at the $80 pricing tier, but most of the games, at least as far as I can see, will be $70. That applies to, I think, most first-party games, but also it will apply to most third-party games. We're already seeing that CD Projekt Red is going to release Cyberpunk 2077 for $70. There's a couple other games like Rune Factory, Guardians of Ozma, that's a $70 game. Street Fighter 6, interestingly, is a $60 title, so there will be a range to it, and I just don't think $80 is the standard, like a lot of people are saying right now. But I think where Nintendo really messed up with the messaging of the pricing for these games is the Switch 2 editions, where, once again, looking at the screenshots, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2 edition, plus Star Across the World, my favorite video game title, that is $80. The same can be said for Mario Party Jamboree with the Jamboree TV expansion, and the same can be said for Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition. So people are looking at this and they're like, oh, they're charging $80 for everything. And while I know a lot of people will not agree with this and they think this is wrong, it's not that simple. I think the way Nintendo is viewing these Switch 2 editions in particular is that, okay, well, we just released Mario Party Jamboree last year for $60. We're adding $20 of value to it. Thus, it is an $80 release now because it essentially is the base game at $60 plus a $20 DLC / enhancements. And I think for these Switch 2 upgrades, these Switch 2 editions, once again, I think there will be, variations in the pricing here because for the Zelda games, those only have a $10 increase over the MSRP. Tears of the Kingdom cost $70 when it came out. The Switch 2 edition is $80. Breath of the Wild was a $60 game, and the Switch 2 edition is $70. Once again, I'm not necessarily defending it, but I don't think it's exactly accurate to say, oh, this Kirby game is $80. Literally it is. On the store shelf, it will have an $80 price tag, but that's because it includes what I think Nintendo is valuing as a $20 DLC and upgrade. It's very confusing, but we have seen over the years that Nintendo games don't really go down in price. We're not going to get Nintendo Selects anymore where they discount the prices permanently down to like 20 or 30 bucks. They maintain their value. So to Nintendo, it's like, okay, well, Breath of the Wild is still a $60 game. We're adding more value to it. Now it's a $70 game because it has this expansion included. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover, just the pricing of video games on the Nintendo Switch. This applies to digital as well, of course, but I'm still seeing people saying, oh, physical is going to be 90, digital 80, all games are 80. No, there is a range to it, and for the most part, it looks like new Nintendo Switch 2 games, unless it is one of Nintendo's like S-tier franchises, I think they're going to be $70. We'll have to wait and see exactly how this all plays out. Maybe I'll be wrong, and Kirby Air Riders, for example, will be an $80 game, but if Donkey Kong Bonanza is $70, I don't think something like Kirby, or maybe even Hyrule Warriors as a spin-off, I don't think those would be $80, but maybe I'll be wrong about that. We'll just have to wait and see. Next up, let's talk about the Switch 2 editions and whether or not that upgraded Switch 2 patch and that new content will actually be on the Switch 2 game card. There has been maybe even more misinformation about this going around because even from Nintendo support in the UK, they had said something that contradicts what Nintendo support in America has said. So it's all very interesting, but I think we do finally have our definitive answer on whether or not, let's say, Prime 4 Beyond, when you buy that Switch 2 box, will it have the Switch 2 edition on the cartridge or will you need to do a download? The answer is good. The answer is that it actually is going to be on the cartridge. So initially there was this email from a Nintendo UK customer support rep saying that yes, we can confirm that the upgrades will be download codes for these titles, and that of course, threw everybody into a spiral. But then the actual support team for the My Nintendo store in the UK, they confirmed that the Switch 2 edition physical copies will come with the base game and the Switch 2 upgrade on the cartridge. Their representative said that yes, the Switch 2 edition will include one cartridge that has the upgrade already in it, meaning no download required to get the Switch 2 edition of, let's say, Pokemon Legends ZA, or Tears of the Kingdom, or Breath of the Wild, or Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World. That content is going to be on the cartridge. It is not a download. You are not buying a Switch 1 cartridge. It is a Switch 2 cartridge. It will likely be red, and it will have that content on there. This is extremely important for us physical collectors. If you wanted to maybe buy a copy of Tears of the Kingdom, even if you already owned it, but you wanted to buy it because, okay, well, I want to have a physical version of the Switch 2 updates. Or for Kirby, you want to make sure you have that Star-Crossed World content on a cartridge, no download required. It sounds like that will be the case. It sounds like you will actually be able to buy these games and not have to have a download. Now, whether or not they release a patch later down the line, that remains to be seen. Maybe there will be a whole market of revised cartridges like there currently are for a lot of the Pokemon games on Switch 1, where they later on re-release them with the patches installed on the cartridge. But at launch, for every Switch 2 edition that we've seen so far, it sounds like the content of the Switch 2 version will be on the cartridge, not a download. And we actually have a third-party game confirming this, where the official Rune Factory account was asked, is there a physical release for Switch 2? The Rune Factory account said, yes, there will be a physical standard edition for the Nintendo Switch 2. Someone replied saying, will it be complete on cartridge, or will the Switch 2 update require a download? And they replied once again back saying, the Nintendo Switch 2 physical version of this game will be on the cartridge, pending any patches or updates that you may be required to download. But the Switch 2 edition of the game for Rune Factory Guardians of Ozma, which is a launch title, will be on the cartridge, and this is labeled as a Switch 2 edition. So I hope that clears things up. Maybe it ends up being on a case-by-case basis, depending on what publishers want to do. But at the very least, for first-party games, and so far the only third-party Switch 2 edition labeled game on release day, it sounds like all of that content will be on the cartridge, which is incredible news. Incredible news. Thank goodness. The box art's still ugly. It has all that messaging on the bottom, but it is on the cartridge, seemingly. Finally, let's talk about Switch 2 game keycards. Now, this is mostly bad news. However, I do think there is a silver lining to this, and the silver lining is that at least it's not a download code, right? These are something physical that you can resell if you decide to in the future. You can lend it to a friend physically. You don't have to do the virtual game card stuff. This is a physical representation of your license of the game, and you can, if you want to, sell it on Facebook Marketplace or take it to GameStop and trade it in. That is a silver lining. However, for those that don't know what this is, basically it's this new initiative, I guess, that Nintendo is starting for specifically third-party games, I imagine. I can't think of really any first-party Nintendo game that would exceed the capacity of a Switch 2 cartridge. We'll see what happens. But basically, it's for Switch 2 third-party games that are too big to fit on a cartridge. Now, CD Projekt Red actually confirmed in an interview with Beat 'em Ups that the largest capacity for a Switch 2 card is 64 gigs. We will see if maybe later down the line they make a bigger file size for the cartridges, but there are third-party games that are bigger than that. So far, it seems like a lot of third-party games are going to be using the game key cards, most notably Street Fighter 6 Years 1 to 2 Fighters Edition. That is a game key card, meaning there will be little to no data of the actual game on the cartridge. You will need to put the cartridge in and download the game. Same thing can be said for Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remaster, though this one is a lot more perplexing because that game is a 3DS remaster and it's only 11 gigs. I'm not sure what Square Enix is doing. This will all depend on what the publisher wants to do and how much they want to cheap out. We don't know the exact hierarchy yet of how many different file sizes there are for publishers and developers to use for their games. It sounds like the limit of that will be 64 gigs, which for a lot of games should be enough. In theory, Street Fighter 6 even, that should be able to fit on there. However, if they want to cheap out on their manufacturing, they will opt in to make it just a game key card. Bravely Default has no excuse being a game key card. That game absolutely could fit on a Switch 2 cartridge, but if they want to save money when they're manufacturing their games, they might opt in to just have it be a game key card. But once again, there are no first-party games that are using this, and considering there are supposedly 64 gig cards, according to CD Projekt Red. I mean, they're putting all of Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty and the DLC and all that. They're putting all of that on a cartridge. I can't imagine a scenario where Nintendo ever has a game keycard version of one of their games. This has never been an issue for their games on Switch 1. They seem to be really good at compressing files, and so far the biggest game they will have ever released is Mario Kart World at around 24 gigs. So unless their file sizes balloon over the course of the Switch 2 generation, I don't think we will ever see a first-party Nintendo game with that game keycard logo on the bottom. And hopefully, if enough people kind of protest it and complain about it, maybe we see Square Enix in the future change their mind and future releases from them will actually have the game on the cartridge. However, once again, I still think there is the silver lining here of it being something physical. It is better than literally buying a box with a code on the inside, because you can sell this, you can loan it to a friend. It's a lot better than it being a download code, in my opinion. You will still need to put this empty cartridge in your Switch 2 to actually play the game. It's not gonna, give you the license to your account. It is tied to the cartridge itself, but for me, I know people like having the complete experience on their cartridge and they don't want to have to download anything, and I'm right there with you. However, if I had to choose between a version of Street Fighter 6 that I buy on the eShop and could never get rid of, I could never sell it if I wanted, versus an empty cartridge that would allow me to do that, I'm going to choose the empty cartridge. I want to have the physical version, even if the data isn't on the card. That's still a better alternative, in my opinion. So that is going to do it for this video. I hope I cleared up some questions you might have about Switch 2 physical games, be it regular Switch 2 games or Switch 2 editions, these upgraded versions. There's a lot of confusion right now, and while it's not all good news, I think all of it kind of has like an asterisk of negativity. I don't think the situation is as bad as people are making it out to be. Yes, game keycards are annoying. However, it's really not that different than a lot of Xbox Series X or PS5 games. Now, I personally have a lot of PS5 games that are on the disc. They are complete on the disc. Maybe there was an update later, but there's a lot of PS5 games that aren't on the disc, and you need to download it anyway. It's really just Nintendo kind of catching up with that. I think it just feels a little bit more surprising because it sounds like it's literally the entire game. We've seen Switch 1 games where it's like download required and it's like a partial amounts of the game, but for Bravely Default, for some reason, you're downloading the entirety of it. It feels a little weird from that aspect, but it's really not that different from what we've had on Switch 1 with certain third-party games, but also on PlayStation and Xbox for years now. Nintendo just finally caught up because third-party games are so big and they can't fit one through those cartridges, at least in some cases. Bravely Default, once again, What are you doing, Square Enix? But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. How do you feel about the entire physical game cartridge situation on the Nintendo Switch 2? I'm starting to warm up a little bit on the box arts. I'm still annoyed at the logo being centered and small. That's really weird and really ugly. But I don't know. We got this look at the side of the boxes, and it looks a little bit more clean when I see it in person like this. You know, it looks a little bit more, maybe I'm just getting used to it. That's probably it. I think I'm just getting used to seeing this box art, but I like the red cases. I will say that. It's really just that logo on the banner that kind of just makes me angry. I don't know why they did that. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch 2 collecting content. Follow me on Twitter at BotoxGames. Check out my other channel at BotoxGames, where I cover Nintendo news. I posted a bunch of preview videos going over my time with Mario Kart World, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and the Switch 2 itself over on that channel. So definitely go check out that. And as always, click on one of these two videos to listen to me ramble even more about some Nintendo collecting nonsense. Until next time, folks. Peace.